I want to tell you something. That I have never met a more competent, a more intelligent, a more tolerant, a more compassionate being outside of what I've experienced from LRH. And I've met the leaders of leaders. Okay? I've met them all. So I say to you, Sir COB, we are lucky to have you, and thank you very much.
While Miscavige would do anything for the church's most famous celebrity, Miscavige began to turn against the Sea Org's highest-ranking executives.
He pretty much had international management shut down. He was into this deep paranoia thing about everybody's out to get him.
He very definitely wiped out that organizational pattern in order to be able to have ultimate power.
In 2004, Miscavige ordered the top officers of the Sea Org to Scientology's Gold Base in Southern California. He forced them to live in a pair of double-wide trailers that came to be called the Hole.
The doors had bars put on them, the windows all had bars put on them, and there was one entrance door that a security guard sat at 24 hours a day.
I had to stay there, sleep there. It stunk, and there were ants crawling around. You sleep about an hour, 2 hours a night. You were in such a mental state that you're very controllable, very suggestible. We were told we needed to come up with what each other's crimes were against Miscavige and Hubbard so that we could eventually get out of the hole.
Scientology is really good at making you think that you're a scoundrel.
Confess your crimes, confess your crimes. What have you done?
Fights would break out. Miscavige would get me all riled up, and I remember one time Mike had done something or not done something, I don't remember, and I was supposed to go beat him up.
One executive was made to mop up the bathroom floor with his tongue. Another was put into a bucket and pummeled by some of the women and called a lesbian.
There was a very powerful air conditioner which blew straight down, and it was set on maximum cold, and a guy was made to sit in a chair and had water poured on his head until he literally turned blue.
Miscavige slapped me across the face, knocked me on the ground, kicked me a couple times.
Flailing fists, kneeing him in the stomach, getting him on the floor.
And you think you want to get up and retaliate. But you also think, I got 75 other people who are all likely to tackle me if I did. And then you get the sheer shock of it. Here's the equivalent of the Pope suddenly knocking you on the ground, and you're thinking, I must have really screwed up.
It was a poisonous environment. People were really frightened. And this went on for years. This isn't a couple of days. The nominal president of the church is a man named Heber Jin. She was in there for 7 years.
What is the statement, God helps those who help themselves? Well, in Scientology, we're engaged in helping people help themselves so they can fully comprehend and understand God.
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
One night, Miscavige comes into the Hole with a boombox.
He said, I'm going to teach you all a lesson. We're all going to play musical chairs.
And musical chairs is a Scientology administrative term for when you move people from different posts rapidly and you create instability.
They played the damn music.
Just killed a man.
He said, we're going to play it to Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. And he emphasized the line,
Nothing really matters.
nothing matters anymore. And that's your whole attitude. That's where you live. That's who you are.
Playing that music, and stop it, and everyone would have to grab a chair.
And there's one person left standing.
Too late. My time has come.
What Miscavige has warned them is that the last person who remains gets to stay. Everybody else, you're expelled, you're going to be thrown out of the Sea Org. These people were fighting to stay in the hole.
Throwing people around, scratching, kicking.
They're tearing chairs apart. They're ripping clothing.
I mean, whatever it took.
So you think you can stop me and split my eye?
But then nothing happens.
Nothing really matters to me.
Out of the goodness of my heart, you can stay. But you better come clean. I better have some good confessions out of you.
I mean, you know, as much as they get into everything that you ever think or do, they never got into my think on this score, that I would never go to prison. And so it was inevitable he literally created this prison camp. It was inevitable that I wasn't going to last there.
It's embarrassing to have ever been involved with, you know, to think about it. You go, God, I can't even believe I'm talking about it, but it was bad.
Let's say the FBI showed up at the home and said, "This is the FBI, we're letting everyone out." Do you think everyone would have said, "Oh, thank God the FBI's here"?
No, I think that everybody, one for one, would have gone, what do you mean? We're doing this voluntarily. We like living in these conditions.
Over the past week, we've been reporting on allegations of physical abuse inside the Church of Scientology. We spoke with the ex-wives of some of the men making the claims of abuse. I read all of your affidavits. Obviously, your ex-husbands have made charges against David Miscavige, saying that they have seen repeated acts of physical violence perpetrated by Mr. Miscavige. Is any of that true?
No. Not one ounce of it. That's not the character of Mr. David Miscavige.
My ex-wife, Marty Rathbun's ex-wife, Tom DeVocht's ex-wife, that were on Anderson Cooper, they all came out of the hole. They were all sent there to do that. They went back to the hole. It's just ridiculous. This line that my ex-wife said,
I lived with Mike Rinder for over 35 years. I know every square inch of Mike Rinder's body.
she said it because she was told to say it by Miscavige. And the proof of that is when Tom DeVocht's ex-wife then repeated the same thing over again.
I knew every inch of him.
You gotta be kidding me.
Everything that happens from the Church of Scientology is scripted.
Don't ever turn the other cheek and acquiesce. Hit him back.
Marty Rathburn suddenly went and leapt on top of Mike Rinder and fought him to the ground and started choking him and beating him.
And Mr.
Nothing seems to be
Miscavige,
done about it.
Mr. Miscavige was not at the property at the time.
Do you not have telephones?
Of course we have telephones.
So
I think
you-
you're being quite rude and quite insulting. Here's the bottom line. Here's the bottom line. There is no history of violence in the church.
As somebody who ran PR for the church for a long time, do you have any regret for anything that you did in that capacity?
Well, I think the biggest regret is when John Sweeney at Panorama was doing his program, it was the culmination of a lot. I mean, I'd been in the hole for a year, and I ended up being sent to England.
Hi, Mike.
He was constantly going, well, why do you have private investigators following me? I'm like,
That never happened. Ever happened.
and of course there were. I was following John Sweeney.
Oh, there it is. Okay, there we are.
He's got his camera and he's standing there and he's saying, I want a response. I have credible witnesses. Did David Miscavige physically assault you? And I said,
Those allegations are absolute, utter rubbish. Absolute, utter rubbish.
You have been assaulted by Miscavige.
many times, many times, perhaps more than anybody else. I was now sort of at the end of my rope. It was a real moment of clarity for me. I don't want to be doing this anymore. This is nuts. That was actually the last thing that I did before I left.
So I've been in Scientology about 2.5 years. I am kicking ass. I felt like I had gotten out of the fucking trap. I didn't have to have a problem. I said, I'm done with auditing. But they insisted on getting me back and said, believe us, believe us, believe us. I got so fucked up. I mean, I went insane. I was like stuck somewhere in a tiny spot behind my eyeballs, looking this way. I mean, I'd never experienced anything like it. 10 fucking years. I was worse than the day that I walked in. It was by design, because they needed to keep me in there. So basically, they had to put a whole new case on me so they could run it. And they just kept trying to fucking keep me stuck in. It was crazy. So I finally said, I'm going my way. You guys go yours. I was pissed. I was sad. I was disillusioned. And I thought, maybe somebody could interview me. Ask me some questions about Scientology. How I got into Scientology and why I got out. Post this 2-hour thing, and it was the #1 thing on YouTube for 2 days before it mysteriously disappeared. The best traps, you get a guy to just keep himself in jail, right? And that's what Scientology does. I started getting all this communication because of that video. You know, you saved my family. You know, I finally had the courage to leave after I watched your thing. You know, I mean, like, there's blood and tears. And then I started to find out, you know, all the stuff that was really happening. You know, I lost money, I got fucked. But then I found out about the abuse in the Sea Org. And I felt like, fuck me, I gotta do something about it. And I finally tracked down Marty Rathbun. Everybody thought he was dead. He was in fucking Mexico. And I went down there and I basically convinced him to talk. And like, we gotta do something. And then he started his blog.
There was a beating every day. And if it wasn't him doing it, it was from him inciting others to do it to others.
I think that it's a cult.
I'm doing my own thing. I want to get on with my life.
I am telling the truth.
Suddenly, I heard senior members of the church were speaking out. So I started to look, and I started to read, and then I started to reach out to people. Two of my daughters are gay and told me how they'd been treated within the church. I didn't know.
Paul Haggis's daughters were openly harassed by church members for being gay. Investigating further, Haggis discovered that church doctrine viewed homosexuality as a disease that only Hubbard's teachings could cure. And a California chapter of Scientology had supported a ban on gay marriage.
I can't be part of an organization that doesn't support human rights for everyone. So I sent a letter to 25 friends in the church that I was resigning. And I'd hoped that they would read this letter and be horrified at the things I'd found out. A few days later, I drive home. There looked to be 10 people standing in my front yard. I recognized them, they're my friends. They said, Paul, we need you to tear up this letter. And we need you to get all the copies and tear them up and resign quietly. I said, I don't do that. I'm sorry, I don't do that. I'd send a copy to Marty Rathbun. He put it on his blog, 1 page on a day, and didn't reveal my name until the Friday. Monday morning, I woke up. 600 of the top newspapers in the world had it. It was in Bulgaria. I mean, it was reprinted in 7 languages. I went, oh my God, what have I done?
I mean, it did garner a lot of interest.
People will judge you one way or the other. I figured people would judge me as really stupid. But then I was really stupid. I was part of this for 30 years before I spoke out. I felt deeply ashamed. Why didn't I do it earlier? Why didn't I look earlier?
People are so indoctrinated and have been in Scientology a really long, long time. Or they've grown up in it. They don't know anything else. It's so scary to them to have to start all over. And it takes a really strong person to stand up to them and say no. And in 2009, my son was on staff at the church, and the Truth Rundown came out in the St. Pete Times, exposing what was going on with the beatings, people in the hole. The church was very mad at my son because he knew it was going to happen, and he didn't tell them. And he didn't tell them because he had a good friend that became friends with Mike Rinder and Marty Rathbun, and he believed what they were saying in the Truth Rundown. The church was threatening, that he was going to get declared a suppressive person if he didn't disconnect from his friend. My son, he was raised a Scientologist, and he'd been on staff. He made $30 a week. He headed up their Boy Scout troop. He was like this consummate youth of Scientology. The Continental Justice Chief called him on the phone, and it was after that that Declare came down. And he was just devastated. The church told his friends everything they could find in his PC folder to ruin his reputation. I wrote this petition. I tried to put in everything good that my son had done. Dear Sarah, thank you for the letter that you sent regarding the situation with Nick Lister. I cannot approve that you continue your connection with Nick. No one's going to tell me when I can and can't speak to him. No one but me. Your Committee of Evidence Findings and Recommendations recommended you be labeled suppressive, engaging in malicious rumor mongering to destroy the authority or repute of higher officers or the leading names of Scientology. My husband was charged with that one because he was telling me what he read on the internet about David Miscavige. They say don't go on the internet, don't read, don't go to these sites.
From the time that I got in, for 30 years, I never read one critical thing about Scientology. When I finally decided to open my eyes and look, I was shocked, just shocked.
The church, but if you remember the Church of Scientology and someone in your family or a friend or your spouse is skeptical or critical of the Church of Scientology, you are supposed to disconnect yourself from that person. And
Tommy Davis, who is the spokesperson for the church, he's being asked about the policy of disconnection.
Anything that's characterized as disconnection or this kind of thing, it's just not true. There isn't.
I confronted him about this, and I said, Tommy, I don't have to search outside to ask for, to check research and see if this has happened to other people. It's happened to my wife. You asked her and me to disconnect from her parents because of something trivial they did years ago.
My wife disconnected from me, my daughter, my son, my brother, my sister, my mother, all of my nieces and nephews. And that is the only family that I have.
You know, you label these people suppressive so that, you know, everybody automatically, they're discredited and they must disconnect from it. And that's how you keep people in a bubble.
That's what they do. I mean, my son was declared because he wouldn't disconnect from his friend. I was declared and my husband was declared because we wouldn't disconnect from my son. And now guess what happened? Everyone connected to us just scatters to the wind. Through all of this time, I have a daughter who's very much into the church. I have a granddaughter who's the love of my life and who loves her Nana. I was planning on talking to my daughter and trying to tell her what was really happening. She hugged me. She told me she loved me. She said, I have to disconnect from you. So, I just was concentrating on smelling her hair and seeing the way she felt, touching her skin, my face. It's the last time I saw them.
It really is the crux of how controlling is any religion over its adherents. And Scientology has perfected a lot of techniques of control. There is no logical explanation as to why other than faith.
Your future, your eternity, all depends on you going up the bridge. It's scary. It's kind of like Christianity with hell. If they don't have the bridge, they can't go free. They don't believe they can get it anywhere else. It's like brainwashing, really simple. I mean, that's a scary word, and it took me a long time to come to that conclusion that that's what's occurred.
You take on a kind of a matrix of thought that is not your own.
And I think that's how I and other people got involved and stuck through it for so long. Because when you're out, you look at it and go, what the crap was I thinking, you know?
It's such a hard thing when you do wake up going, oh my God, because you have this wave of regrets. I just started to think that maybe my entire life has been a lie.
You just don't see it happening to you. You justify so much. Cults, they prey on people. suggesting that, you should be able to think for yourself, and then telling you exactly how you have to think or get out. And if you get out, there will be consequences.
Come on, Marty. Got anything to say?
What's your name?
Why don't you answer his question?
Beat it. I should get off my property, boy.
The real sustained campaign began in early 2009 when I spoke to the St. Petersburg Times. And I've been hounded and hunted like wild prey. There's a policy of the Office of Special Affairs authored by L. Ron Hubbard. When somebody's speaking out against Scientology, investigate to find out who the instigator is.
I start getting calls from the church, and they're really coming after me.
They showed up at my mother's house. The feeling in the pit of your stomach knowing that Scientology's chief dirty tricks PI was just on my mother's front step. They've tried to destroy me, there's no question. They create anonymous websites about me and smear me with a lot of garbage.
www.whoistomdevock.com.
Whoispaulhaggis.com. Paul Haggis, the hypocrite of Hollywood.
This guy's a sex pervert, or this guy's a drug dealer.
In the meantime, survey carefully to find out what he most values and protects. Immediately draw up a three-pronged program to threaten it effectively. I don't value anything more than Monique. That's why this campaign ended up on our doorstep.
Was she there?
I knew they had their goons around. And then the guy rolls down his window, and I saw the truck, and he starts filming, and I go, okay, this is not good.
What's going on? Oh, we're just doing a documentary.
Documentary?
Former Scientology deal.
But it would probably be a good idea if y'all went ahead. Now that you've gotten what you need, go ahead and leave the area.
Sure.
Okay?
I don't know who these people are. I don't know what they're capable of. And now that I have my son, I have a little Louisville slugger I keep next to me.
It's been nonstop onslaught for 5 years.
I told you to leave. Get out of here.
I'm leaving.
You can't even defend yourself on this, can you?
What's your name?
I gave you my name, Marty.
What's your name?
Marty, I gave you my name.
The people on Marty's doorstep were sent by Scientology because the church had branded Marty a squirrel, a term invented by Hubbard for former members who threatened church teachings.
David Miscavige had you come all the way from
Marty,
San Jose.
Marty, you can't do that.
You can't do that, Marty.
I just did it. That's my personal property, Marty.
Yeah, that's right.
I got arrested, man. I got arrested for grabbing this guy's glasses.
You said don't look at her. You understand that? Yeah. I heard her.
Of course, the guy had been stalking Monique for 2 years. He looks like a leering pervert, like Norman Bates from Psycho. They didn't break his glasses. I just removed them from his face. They got it all on videotape from their surveillance house that was filming 24/7, 365 for 5 years across the street from us.
This lawsuit with Monique Rathman. It's a brilliant legal strategy. If Marty sues, the church just says this is a First Amendment fight. This should not be in a court of law. But Monique was never in Scientology. She's suing David Miscavige and asking to depose him. And Scientology will do anything to keep him out of that situation.
And the point is, Judge, if you let me make my presentation on First Amendment law that comes from the United States Supreme Court, all of this...
For every court date, the church hires a bevy of high-priced lawyers. They are determined to use every legal trick in the book to keep Miscavige from having to testify about church abuses or whether the religion of Scientology is actually operated like a business, controlled by the whims of a single individual. In 2014, Miscavige celebrated the ongoing expansion of the church, but he was hiding a terrible secret. The church's active membership has dropped to fewer than 50,000 people, yet the financial value of Scientology is soaring.
And how about we just say 2013 is the year we went stratospheric?
The church is making investments and buying valuable real estate all over the world. That financial clout gives Scientology enormous power. It's a kind of tax-free shell company growing past $3 billion in assets.
The church now no longer has a public face. There's no spokespeople, they don't do media interviews. And that suits Miscavige. There is nobody that he is willing to have be the face of Scientology other than himself, but he's afraid to be interviewed by anybody for fear that they are going to ask him questions that he can't answer or doesn't want to answer.
Where are the checks and balances on his power? There is none. So there are two things that could happen. One is the IRS would reconsider its tax exemption. The only other thing is that some of these celebrity megaphones could turn against the church. And Tom Cruise should be leading that chorus.
Is there anything that you look back on in terms of your own career in the church and think, wow, I wish I hadn't done that?
You know, we talked about karma earlier, you know, it still happens that it's like, it's just this, I constantly get presented with who I was and you know, and I constantly don't like what I see, and I sort of constantly keep dying deaths. You know, I don't know how many more deaths I have left, but I regret, and I'm ashamed of the entire experience, you know.
What I take away from it is that we lock up a portion of our own mind. We willingly put cuffs on. We willingly avoid things that could cause us pain if we looked. If we can just believe something, then we don't have to really think for ourselves, do we? And so I can't damn these people who aren't coming out or who are hiding once they come out because they're ashamed. You know, I feel the same shame.
And I'm fighting back by communicating, you know? It's a peaceful protest. I want the truth to be known, and
Thank you.
You're welcome.